In December 1939, on the snow-covered plains of Finland's Karelian isthmus, troops of the Red Army cautiously advanced on a massively outnumbered foe. Seconds later, in what appeared to be a deserted landscape, a single shot rang out and yet another invader fell dead. They didn't know it, but hidden to their front and stalking their every move was the most successful sniper in the history of warfare. In this video, using modern technology, the latest historical research and rare witness testimony will explore the life and map out the war path of the legendary Simo Häyhä, the White Death. Born on the 17th of December 1905 on a farm near the town of Routjärvi, in the Russian Grand Duchy of Finland, Simo was the seventh child in the Häyhä family. Quiet and reserved, he completed 4 years of school and pursued no further education, opting for a simple life of farm work, forestry, fishing and hunting in the countryside. By the time he came of age, his home country of Finland had gained its independence from the collapsing Russian Empire and fought a brutal civil war of its own. But here, in contrast to Russia, the Whites had won. Simo joined the Finnish White Guard, now renamed the Civil Guard, at the age of 17. It was a trained citizen militia composed of old Civil War veterans, volunteers and reservists. His friends called him Simunya, a play on his name meaning Sim Häyhä in Finnish. In 1925, Simo was conscripted into the Finnish army proper, serving until 1927, after which he remained an active reservist in the Civil Guard. It was around this time when the Finnish army adopted as its standard-issue rifle the M27, a domestically produced and improved version of the standard Russian Mosin-Nagant. But the Civil Guard, trained by German Jaegers, opted for an even better rifle, the M2830. It was nicknamed the Pushtikorva after the Finnish Spitz, a hunting dog whose ears resembled the excellent front sights of the rifle. Those thick ears were very useful for calculating the wind at long distances, while the new rear sights sported two separate adjustment settings, the quick one for hundreds of meters distance and the precise one for the exact target range estimation, something that Simo Häyhä would prove himself unsurpassed at. But the Finnish government could not afford to mass-produce such expensive rifles, so it offered the willing citizens the option to pay a portion of the cost and be allowed to take the rifle home and use it for hunting, recreation, and home defense. Simo, along with some 30,000 other civil guardsmen, took this deal and bought his own Mosin M2830, serial number 60974. The Civil Guard hosted regular shooting competitions which Simo, an avid hunter and recreational shooter, duly attended. The competition's prizes that were very modest, in which Simo, the regular top-scoring champion and certified master marksman, would often win just a pair of teaspoons. But he didn't mind.
The value of the Civil Guard shooting competitions was enormous. All of us guardsmen were well trained, very familiar with our weapons, and with each other. Without them, Finland would perhaps not have survived the Winter War.
He was in love with his rifle, cleaning it obsessively every day. In Simo and many others, Finland had forged a peacetime citizenry of excellent marksmen, whom she was about to call upon in her time of greatest need. In the autumn of 1939, the Third Reich and the USSR invaded and crushed Poland, signing a treaty which divided Eastern Europe into each power's respective spheres of influence. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, as it would become known, gave the Soviet Union a free hand to occupy and annex the Baltic states, and then, in November, to set its sights on Finland. After the Civil War, the Finnish territory included the strategically vital Karelian isthmus, which stretched up to a mere 40 kilometers from Leningrad, Russia's second-largest city, home of the Baltic Soviet fleet, and the cradle of the 1917 Communist Revolution. Such close proximity of Leningrad to a potentially hostile state was ruled unacceptable by Stalin. And so Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov proposed to settle the matter through a territorial exchange. But the Finns, distrustful of Stalin and afraid of further Soviet demands, gave Molotov a resolute "niet." Simo recalled the Soviet response.
It was the last day of November, 1939. The villages on our side of the border, and the infantry had crossed the demarcation line. Well, this is it then, we all thought. The war had begun.
Simo immediately rushed to get back to his unit, which was assembling some 60 kilometers north of Lake Letuka. With his own personal rifle over his shoulder, he was assigned as a corporal to the 6th Company of the 34th Infantry Regiment. When he arrived, he and his comrades were greeted by the imposing figure of the company's commander, Lieutenant Arni Juutalainen, a veteran of the French Foreign Legion known to his men as Maricon Kaul, the terror of Morocco.
On our very first meeting, in his typical style, Lieutenant Juutilainen said, "We are about to fight the Russians. Remember, they are our neighbors, so don't be hitting them too hard. Hit them just hard enough to blow off their heads."
The 34th Regiment, as part of the Finnish 12th Division, was ordered to the Kola River area, located here in the Finnish Karjala region. A single road and railway line passed through this heavily wooded area, connecting the Soviet border with the town of Limoya, where the division had set up its headquarters. A single traversable route in the vast frozen wasteland of forests, marshes and lakes, through which 120,000 men, 400 tanks and 600 artillery pieces of the Soviet 8th Army were preparing to advance. Against them stood the 40,000-strong Finnish 4th Corps, whose 12th Division stretched 60 kilometers along the Kola River and will receive the brunt of the attack. The Soviet objective, sweep around Lake Letuka and outflank the heavily fortified Mannerheim Line, the main line of defense protecting the Karelian isthmus and Finland from invasion. The danger was apparent to every Finn, with arguably the outcome of the war and the fate of the entire country at stake. Kola simply had to hold. The vanguard of the Soviet juggernaut was the 56th Rifle Division, which, after a short fight, captured the border town of Suilahti and then pursued the retreating Finns westwards. They fought several sharp delaying actions, but the situation was becoming desperate. The massive Soviet infantry in their fairly ubiquitous brown coats appeared to be endless, and the red wave, it seemed, was about to overrun them. "Will Kola hold?" became the collective cry of the entire nation. On the 4th of December, Simo's regiment made a stand in the defensive positions on the Kola River here. The temperature was minus 25 degrees Celsius during the day, dropping to a horrifying minus 40 during the night. The Soviet infantrymen, many of whom hailed from the southern, warmer parts of the country like Ukraine, were completely unaccustomed to such severe elements, whilst the Finns felt right at home. Here's Simo.
The Russians were sitting around 4 large campfires, completely oblivious to our presence. There were no sentries, no real security behind their lines. Everyone's gathered around the fires trying to get warm. We managed to crawl up very close, and then we unleashed fire on them with everything we had and scattered them into the freezing.
The Finns employed the tactic of active defense, stubbornly holding on to the well-dug-in positions on the main line while constantly harassing the enemy with ambushes, daring raids deep behind the lines, and of course, sniping. The Soviets were stunned by the tenacity of the resistance. Their advantage in tanks, artillery and air power was all but completely neglected by the terrain and the weather. The Red Army, fresh out of Stalin's purges, seemed to lack any tactical flexibility and opted to simply throw more and more men at the exhausted but determined Finnish defenders, over and over again with the same results. In these actions, Lieutenant Juutalainen immediately took notice of Simo's superb marksmanship. An enemy sniper located about 450 meters away had shot and killed 4 of their comrades. Simo searched for him for hours, when at sunset the sunlight carried by the snow reflected off his scope and betrayed his position. Simo took aim, only for the Russian sniper to stand up and try to walk away, no doubt satisfied with his day's work and feeling safe in the dim evening and at such long range. A mistake he and many others learned the hard way. As a corporal, he acted as a squad leader when needed, armed with the Finnish KP-31 submachine gun, but first and foremost, he was a sniper.
I had to go on many recon patrols with my men and lead many attacks, but sniping was the everyday duty. We would observe the enemy activity during the day and would determine the most target-rich environment. Then I would go out at night and prepare a good firing position from which it was easy to shoot, but not so easy for the enemy to spot. I was happy with the results.
Using the latest technology, rare historical documents, and Simo's own testimony, we were able to pinpoint the exact location of several of his sniping positions. As we can see here, one was right in front of the Soviet lines, while others, such as this one, were located on the flanks of the expected attack, perfect for shooting officers, NCOs, and machine gun crews from unexpected directions. The short winter days lasted only about 3 to 5 hours and maps of the area were very scarce, so Simo had to create his own one in his head, taking care to memorize every detail of the terrain. At about 160 centimeters tall and an experienced trekker, he moved through the snowy woodlands with relative ease, often using skis to maximize his speed. As we can see in these post-war photos of Simo's shooting positions, he always picked a spot next to a boulder or a tree, which he would use as cover and concealment. Then he would heap snow to the back of his position, creating an all-round white background against which his layered snowsuit and gauze-wrapped rifle would blend perfectly in and give no silhouette. He poured water from his canteen in front of the position, soaking the powdery snow so it wouldn't burst into the air and reveal his position once the rifle was fired. And to prevent his own warm breath from betraying him, he would keep snow in his mouth at all times, consuming it only once melted, sometimes with lumps of sugar or rye crisps to sustain himself. With his sights pre-zeroed at the optimal 150 meters, Simo waited for the sun to rise and then reveal fresh targets. He would spot a sentry, being relieved at his post and walking away, then a machine gun firing on his comrades in the main line, sometimes a trench periscope looking for him. And as per usual, the Soviets replied with heavy guns in a desperate attempt to silence the hidden menace. Almost every day, mortar and artillery fire would erupt like an earthquake, with shells of all calibers blowing up the tall trees, sending white-hot shrapnel and wood splinters across the landscape and kicking up large clouds of powdery snow into the air. But the Taker Ampuya, or the magic shooter as he became known, remained motionless and unscathed in his position, killing on average 5 to 10 Russians a day. All the while, the Battle of Kola was raging, with heavy losses on the Finnish side and far more for the Soviets, who were losing tens of thousands of men every week. Estimates suggest that during the First World War it took roughly 7,000 bullets to kill a single enemy. By the time of the 21st century, that number had reached up to 100,000. While in stark contrast to both figures, the bullets required to kill an enemy for a trained, skillful sniper during the Second World War came down on average to about 1.3. And Simo did this using iron sights. The optical sights on the rifle were not ideal, he used to say. They tended to fog up in the cold, glimmer from the sunlight reflected off the snow, and worst of all, he'd have had to raise his head way up high to aim through them. Nothing short of a death sentence during the Winter War. On the 21st of December 1939, Simo Häyhä would score a personal record of 25 kills in a single day, bringing his personal tally up to 138 confirmed kills since the start of the fighting. This incredible number turned Simo into a celebrity. He was already called the magic shooter by his comrades, but the enemy would soon brand him by a different, far more jarring nickname, Bloodied, the White Death. Initially coined as a cynical reference to the snowy environment in which tens of thousands of Soviet soldiers had already met their demise, be it from the freezing cold, hunger, or indeed Finnish snipers, it would ultimately become synonymous with one man who embodied all that awaited the invaders in Finland. Simo's lethal sniping streak continued, reaching 199 by the end of January and 219 confirmed kills by the middle of February, with hundreds more unconfirmed. But by then, the Red Army had reorganized and learned from its mistakes. A new offensive was unleashed along the whole front line. Heroic, but seriously depleted, the Finnish army began to give way. The Mannerheim line was beginning to crack, and so did the Kola. Here, the Soviet 128th Rifle Division broke through in the south and pushed all the way to the area of Lake Ulismainen. It was now that Simo's regiment was redeployed from the northern Kola sector and thrust into the counterattack. Here's Simo again.
On March 6th, I found myself in the dark forest of Ulisma. We were once more sent into one of the many counterattacks. There was a swamp, about 300 meters wide, which we crossed and charged into the enemy positions. We forced them to retreat, but some brave soldiers of theirs remained behind to hold us back for the rest of them to escape. Suddenly, there was a shot in my mouth and lost consciousness.
An explosive bullet had shattered Simo's left jawbone and knocked out several of his teeth, leaving a horrifying wound. Unconscious and presumed dead, he was dragged back and dumped on top of a pile of freezing corpses. As the battle was coming to a close, Simo's absence became apparent to his comrades, who began frantically searching for him. It was his own cousin, Toivo Häyhä, serving in the same unit, who finally recognized him amongst the lifeless bodies of the fallen.
The next thing I remember, one of our guys was turning me around, yelling for the medics and attempting to give me first aid. They placed me on a man-towed sledge to be dragged back to the rear, but I was choking. I put myself onto my stomach so that the blood would stop filling my lungs and I was finally able to breathe. I managed to stay conscious for some 300 meters before I completely blacked out. I woke up 7 days later on March 13th, the day of the armistice.
The war was over. After 98 days of fighting and 7 days in a coma, Simo awoke to the peace of spring. It would take years of medical care and 26 complex surgeries to fix his jaw, but despite serious disfigurement, he would eventually make a full recovery. Häyhä became a living legend, highly decorated and celebrated by his countrymen as a hero and symbol of resistance. His famous M2830 rifle would never be recovered and remains lost somewhere on the battlefield of Urismaa near the Karelian River. Returning to his modest lifestyle of farming and hunting with his loyal Finnish Spitz, Kille, Simo would live a long and quiet life, reaching the ripe old age of 96 before his death in 2002. His final kill count, 542 enemy soldiers, of which he would say,
"This is my sin list, and on it are about 500 people. I did what I was ordered to, as well as I could. Had everyone else not done the same, there would be no Finland."
Today, that humble man from rural Finland, the White Death, is remembered as the most lethal sniper in all of history.